Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to get line dry. Want to lose weight and keep you... Good for you.
In my financial situation.
Before deliberations begin later this.
After weeks of unexplained murders, the ominous, unknown killer is still on the loose. After little evidence has been found, a young girl states that she survived one of the killer's attacks and bravely tells her story.
I woke up because I had a bad dream. I saw the window was open, but I know it was closed before I went to bed. I got up and shut it. Then I crawled under my covers and tried to get back to sleep. That's when I had a strange feeling, like someone was watching me. I looked up and I saw a pair of eyes, and they weren't normal eyes, no. They were dark demon eyes. They just plain out terrified me. Then I saw his mouth, a long, sticky smile that really scared me even more. The guy stood there, watching me, and after forever, he said it. He said, "Go to sleep." All crazy, and I screamed, and he had a knife, and he jumped on top of my bed, and I kicked, and I punched, and I rolled around till I wanted him off. And that's when Daddy broke the door. The man threw the knife, and it hit Daddy's shoulder. I was so scared Daddy would die. Then the police came. The man went out of the room and down the hallway. Then I heard a big crash. I came out of my room. I saw the window was broke. I looked out and he disappeared. But I keep having bad dreams about that face, those eyes, that smile.
Police are still on the lookout for this man. If you see anyone that fits the description in this story, please contact your local police department.
Jeff and his family had just moved into a new neighborhood. His dad had gotten a promotion at work, and they thought it would be best to live in one of those fancy neighborhoods. Jeff and his brother Lou couldn't complain, though. A new, better house. What was not to love? As they were getting unpacked, one of their neighbors came by.
Hello, I'm Barbara. I live across the street from you. Well, I just wanted to introduce myself and my son.
She turned around and called her son over.
Billy, these are our new neighbors.
Billy said hi and ran back to play in his yard.
Well, I'm Margaret, and this is my husband Peter and my two sons, Jeff and Lou.
They each introduced themselves, and then Barbara invited them to her son's birthday. Jeff and his brother were about to object when their mother said that they would love to. When Jeff and his family were done packing, Jeff went up to his mom.
Mom, why would you invite us to some kid's party? If you haven't noticed, I'm not some dumb kid.
Jeff, we just moved here. We should show that we want to spend time with our neighbors. Now, we're going to that party, and that's final.
Jeff started to talk.
But I don't even know that...
But stopped himself, knowing that he couldn't do anything.
Ugh, forget it.
Whenever his mom said something, it was final. He walked up to his room and plopped down on his bed. He sat there, looking at his ceiling, when suddenly, he got a weird feeling. not so much a pain, but a weird feeling. He dismissed it as just some random feeling. He heard his mother call him down to get his stuff, and he walked down to get it. The next day, Jeff walked downstairs to get breakfast and get ready for school. As he sat there, eating his breakfast, he once again got that feeling. This time, it was stronger. It gave him a slight tugging pain, but he once again dismissed it. As he and Lou finished breakfast, they walked down to the bus stop. They sat there waiting for the bus, and then, all of a sudden, some kid on a skateboard jumped over them, only inches above their laps. They both jumped back in surprise.
Hey, what the hell?
The kid landed and turned back to them. He kicked his skateboard up and caught it with his hands. The kid seemed to be about 12, 1 year younger than Jeff. He wore an Aeropostale shirt and ripped blue jeans.
Well. It looks like we got some new meat.
Suddenly, 2 other kids appeared. One was super skinny, and the other was huge.
Well, since you're new here and all, I'll go ahead and make introductions. Over there's Keith.
Jeff and Lou looked over to the skinny kid. He had a dopey face that you would expect a sidekick to have.
And he's Troy.
They looked over at the fat kid. Talk about obese. This kid looked like he hadn't exercised since he was crawling.
And most importantly, I am Randy. Now, for all the kids in this neighborhood, there is a small fare to ride the bus, if you catch my drift.
Lou stood up, ready to punch the lights out of the kid's eyes, when one of his friends pulled a knife on him.
I had hoped you would have been more cooperative, but I guess we gotta do this the hard way.
The kid walked up to Lou and took his wallet out of his pocket. Jeff got that feeling again. Now it was truly strong, a burning sensation. He stood up, but Lou gestured to him to sit down. Jeff ignored him and walked up to the kid.
Listen here, you little punk. Give back my bro's wallet, or else.
Randy put the wallet in his pocket and pulled out his own knife.
What? And what will you do?
Just as he finished the sentence, Jeff popped the kid in the nose. As Randy reached for his face, Jeff grabbed the kid's wrist and broke it. Randy screamed, and Jeff grabbed the knife from his hand. Troy and Keith rushed Jeff, but Jeff was too quick. He threw Randy to the ground. Keith lashed out at him, but Jeff ducked and stabbed him in the arm. Keith dropped his knife and fell to the ground screaming. Troy rushed him too, but Jeff didn't even need the knife. He just punched Troy straight in the stomach and Troy went down. As he fell, he puked all over. Lou could do nothing but look in amazement at Jeff.
Jeff, how did you...
That was all Lou said. They saw the bus coming and knew they'd be blamed for the whole thing. So they started running as fast as they could. As they ran, they looked back and saw the bus driver rushing over to Randy and the others. As Jeff and Lou made it to school, they didn't dare tell what happened. They just sat and listened. Lou just thought of the events as his brother beating up a few kids. But Jeff knew it was more. It was something scary. As he got that feeling, he felt how powerful it was. The urge to just hurt someone. He didn't like how it sounded, but he couldn't help feeling happy. He felt that strange feeling go away and stay away for the entire day of school. Even as he walked home due to the whole thing near the bus stop, and how now he probably wouldn't be taking the bus anymore, he felt happy. When he got home, his parents asked him how his day was, and he replied in a somewhat ominous voice.
It was a wonderful day.
The next morning, Jeff heard a knock at his front door. He walked down to find 2 police officers at the door, and his mother looking back at him with an angry look.
Jeff, these officers tell me that you attacked 3 kids, that it wasn't regular fighting, and that they were stabbed. Stabbed, son.
Jeff's gaze fell to the floor, showing his mother that it was true.
Mom, they were the ones who pulled the knives on me and Lou.
Son, we've found 3 kids, 2 stabbed, 1 having a bruise on his stomach, and we have witnesses proving that you fled the scene. Now, what does that tell us?
Jeff knew it was no use. He could say that he and Lou had been attacked, but there was no proof it was not them who attacked first. He couldn't say that they weren't fleeing because, truth be told, they were. So Jeff couldn't defend himself or Lou.
Son, call down your brother.
Jeff couldn't do it, since it was him who beat up all the kids.
Sir, it was me. I was the one who beat up the kids. Lou tried to hold me back, but he couldn't stop me.
The cop looked at his partner, and they both nodded.
Well, kid, looks like you're in juvie.
Wait!
They all looked up to see Lou holding a knife. The officers pulled their guns and locked them on Lou.
It was me. I beat up those little punks, and I have the marks to prove it.
Lou lifted up his sleeves to reveal cuts and bruises as if he was in a struggle.
Son, just put the knife down.
Lou held up the knife and dropped it to the ground. He put his hands up and walked over to the cops.
No! Lou! It was me! I did it!
Jeff had tears running down his face.
Poor bro. Trying to take the blame for what I did. Well, take me away.
The police led Lou out to the patrol car.
Lou! Tell them it was me! Tell them! I was the one who beat up those kids!
Jeff's mother put her hands on his shoulders.
Jeff, please. You don't have to lie. We know it was Lou. You can stop.
Jeff watched helplessly as the car sped off with Lou inside. A few minutes later, Jeff's dad pulled into the driveway, saw Jeff's face, and knew something was wrong.
Son, what is it?
Jeff couldn't answer. His vocal cords were strained from crying. Instead, Jeff's mother walked his father inside to break the bad news to him as Jeff wept in the driveway. After an hour or so, Jeff walked back into the house, seeing that both his parents were shocked, sad, and disappointed. He couldn't look at them. He couldn't see how they thought of Lou when it was his fault. He just went to sleep, trying to get the whole thing off his mind. 2 days went by with no word from Lou at the juvenile detention center. No friends to hang out with. Nothing but sadness and guilt. That was until Saturday, when Jeff's mother woke him. She wore her usual happy, sunshiny smile.
Jeff, today's the day.
Jeff's mother opened up the curtains and let the light flood into his room.
What's today?
Jeff stirred awake.
Why, it's Billy's party.
Jeff was now fully awake.
Mom, you're joking, right? You don't expect me to go to some kid's party after...
There was a long pause.
Jeff, we both know what happened. I think this party could be the thing that brightens up the past days. Now, get dressed.
Jeff's mother walked out of the room and downstairs to get herself ready. He fought himself to get up. He picked out a random shirt and a pair of jeans and walked downstairs. He saw his mother and father all dressed up, his mother in a dress and his father in a suit. He wondered why they would ever wear such fancy clothes to a kid's party.
Son, is that all you're going to wear?
Better than wearing too much.
Jeff's mother had resisted the urge to yell at him and concealed her feelings with a smile.
Now, Jeff, we may be overdressed, but this is how you go if you want to make an impression.
Jeff grunted and went back up to his room. A minute later, he yelled down the stairs.
I don't have any fancy clothes.
Just pick out something.
Jeff looked around in his closet for what he would call fancy. He found a pair of black dress pants he had for special occasions and an undershirt. He couldn't find a shirt to go with it, though. He looked around and found only striped and patterned shirts. None of them went with dress pants. Finally, he found a white hoodie and put it on and went downstairs.
You're wearing that?
Jeff's mother looked at her watch.
Oh, no time to change. Let's just go.
Jeff's mother herded him and his father out the door. They crossed the street and made their way to Barbara and Billy's house. Once there, they knocked on the door. In a moment, Barbara appeared. Just like Jeff's parents, she too was overdressed. As they walked inside, all Jeff could see were adults. No kids.
The kids are out in the yard, Jeff. How about you go and meet some of them?
Jeff walked outside to a yard full of kids. They were running around in weird cowboy costumes and shooting each other with plastic guns. He might as well have been standing in a Toys R Us. Suddenly, a kid came up to him and handed him a toy gun and a hat.
Hey, wanna play?
No, kid. I'm way too old for this stuff.
The kid looked at Jeff with a weird puppy dog face.
Please?
Fine.
Jeff put on the hat and started to pretend shoot at the kids. At first he thought it was totally ridiculous, but then he started to actually have fun. It might not have been super cool, but it was the first time he had done something that took his mind off of Lou. So he played with the kids for a while until he heard a noise. A weird, rolling noise. Then it hit him. Randy, Troy, and Keith all jumped over the fence on their skateboards. Jeff dropped the fake gun and ripped off the hat. Randy looked at Jeff with a burning hatred.
Hello. Jeff, is it? We have some unfinished business.
Jeff saw Randy's bruised nose.
I think we're even. I beat the crap out of you, and you got my brother sent to juvie.
Randy got an angry look in his eyes.
Oh, no, Jeff. I don't go for even, Jeff. I go for winning, Jeff. You may have kicked our asses that one time, little boy, but that's not going to happen today.
As Randy spoke, he rushed at Jeff. They both fell to the ground. Randy punched Jeff in the nose, and Jeff grabbed him by the ears and headbutted him. Jeff pushed Randy off of him, and both rose to their feet. Kids were screaming and parents were running out of the house. Troy and Keith both pulled guns out of their pockets.
No one interrupts or guts will fly.
Randy pulled a knife on Jeff and stabbed it into his shoulder. Jeff screamed and fell to his knees. Randy started kicking him in the face. After 3 kicks, Jeff grabbed his foot and twisted it, causing Randy to fall to the ground. Jeff stood up and walked to the back door. Troy grabbed him.
Need some help?
Troy picked Jeff up by the back of the collar and threw him through the patio door. As Jeff tried to stand, he was kicked down to the ground. Randy repeatedly kicked Jeff over and over until Jeff was coughing up blood.
Come on, Jeff! Fight me!
Randy picked Jeff up and threw him into the kitchen. Randy saw a bottle of vodka on the counter. He grabbed it and smashed the glass over Jeff's head.
Fight!
Randy threw Jeff back into the living room.
Come on, Jeff! Look at me!
Jeff glanced up, blood streaming down his face.
I was the one who got your brother sent to juvie. And now you're just gonna sit there and let him rot for a whole year? You're worse than I am. You should be ashamed.
Jeff started to get up.
Oh, finally! He stood up to fight!
Jeff was on his feet then, blood and vodka dripping from his face. Once again, he got a strange feeling. The one he hadn't felt for a while.
Yes! Finally, he's up!
Randy ran at Jeff, and that's when it happened. Something inside Jeff snapped. His psyche was destroyed. All rational thinking was gone. All he could do was kill. Jeff grabbed Randy and pile drove him into the ground. He climbed on top of him and punched him straight in the heart. The punch was so vicious that it caused an arrhythmia. In seconds, Randy's heart stopped. Randy gasped, trying to catch his breath, but Jeff never let up, hammering punches into Randy's face and chest. Blood gushed, and in moments, Randy's body gave out, and he took one final breath, and then died. In the silence that followed the brutal beating, Jeff finally noticed that everyone was looking at him. Everyone. The parents, the crying kids, even Troy and Keith, with their guns pointed at him. Jeff, seeing the guns trained on him, ran for the stairs. As he ran, Troy and Keith fired at him, but none of the bullets connected. Jeff ran up the stairs. He heard Troy and Keith following behind him in close pursuit. As Troy and Keith let out their final rounds of bullets, Jeff ducked into the bathroom. He grabbed the towel rack and ripped it off the wall. Moments later, Troy and Keith raced into the room, knives at the ready. Troy, spotting Jeff, swung his knife at him, but Jeff backed away, and then retaliated, smashing the towel rack into Troy's face. Troy went down hard, out cold in a heap upon the floor. Only Keith remained standing. Unfortunately for Jeff, Keith was more agile than Troy, and when Jeff went to strike with the towel rack, Keith dodged the assault, dropped the knife, and grabbed Jeff by the throat. Keith then pushed Jeff into the wall, upsetting a container of bleach which sat on the shelf above them. The container fell and burst on contact with Jeff and Keith, drenching them in its corrosive contents. In a moment, both of them were burned and screaming in pain. Jeff, however, was not about to let a little bleach become the end of him. He wiped his eyes as best he could, then pulled back the towel rack and swung it straight into Keith's head, landing one well-placed blow to the bully's temple. As Keith lay on the bathroom tile, bleeding out from the wound on his head, an ominous smile flashed across his face.
What's so funny?
Without a word, Keith pulled out a lighter and switched it on.
What's funny is that you're covered in bleach and alcohol.
Jeff's eyes widened as Keith threw the lighter at him. As soon as the flame made contact with him, the flames ignited the alcohol in the vodka. While the alcohol burned him, the bleach worked on his skin. Jeff let out a terrible screech as he caught on fire. He tried to roll to put out the fire, but it was no use. The alcohol had turned him into a walking inferno. He ran down the hall to the stairs. Once there, he collapsed, tumbling down the steps and landing in a pile at the foot of a crowd of people that had formed in the lower level of the house. People screamed as they saw Jeff's condition. Jeff was nearly dead, barely conscious at the base of the stairs, and appeared to be horribly injured. The last thing that Jeff saw before blacking out was his mother and the other parents trying to extinguish the flames, trying to extinguish him. Darkness took him. When Jeff awoke, he had a cast wrapped around his face. He couldn't see a thing, but he felt another cast, this one on his shoulder, and he felt stitches all over his body. He tried to stand up and realized there was some sort of tube in his arm. When he got up, it fell out, and a nurse rushed in.
I don't think you can get out of bed just yet.
The nurse put Jeff back in his bed and reinserted the tube. Jeff sat there without the benefit of his vision, with no idea what his surroundings were. Finally, after several hours, he heard his mother.
Honey, are you okay?
Jeff couldn't answer. His face was covered, and he was unable to speak.
Oh, honey, I have great news. After all the witnesses told the police that Randy confessed to trying to attack you, they decided to let Lou go.
The news inspired Jeff to bolt up, but he stopped himself halfway, remembering the tube coming out of his arm.
He'll be out by tomorrow, and then you two will be able to be together again.
Jeff's mother gave him a hug and said her goodbyes. During the next couple of weeks, Jeff was visited many times by his family, but eventually there came the day when his bandages were to be removed. Jeff's family was all there to see it, to see what he would look like. As the doctors unwrapped the bandages from Jeff's face, everyone was on the edge of their seats. They waited in anticipation until the last bandage holding the cover over his face was nearly removed.
Now we'll hope for the best.
The doctor quickly pulled the cloth, letting the rest fall from Jeff's face. Jeff's mother screamed at the sight of his face. Lou and Jeff's dad stared awestruck at Jeff's face.
What? What happened to my face?
Jeff rushed out of bed and ran to the bathroom. He looked in the mirror and saw the cause of the distress. His face. It was horrible. His lips were burnt to a deep shade of red. His face had turned a pure white, and his hair had been singed from brown to black. He slowly put his hand to his face. It had a sort of leathery feel to it now. He looked back at his family, and then back at the mirror.
Jeff, it's not that bad.
Not that bad. It's perfect.
Jeff's family was stunned by his remarks. Jeff laughed uncontrollably. His parents noticed that their son's left eye was twitching. So was his left hand.
Jeff? Are you okay?
Okay. I've never felt more happy. This face goes perfectly with me.
Jeff couldn't stop laughing. He stroked his face, feeling it, looking at it in the mirror. As it turned out, while Jeff was fighting Randy, he literally went insane. Something had snapped inside of him, changing him in an instant. What remained of Jeff was now a crazy killing machine. His parents, of course, had no idea.
Doctor, is my son all right? You know, in the head?
Oh, yes. This behavior is typical for patients that have taken very large amounts of painkillers. If his behavior doesn't change in a few weeks, bring him back here, and we'll reevaluate him psychologically.
Thank you, Doctor.
Jeff's mother went over to her son.
Jeff, sweetie, it's time to go.
Jeff looked away from the mirror. His face still formed into a crazy smile.
Okay, Mommy.
Jeff's mother put a hand on his shoulder and led him to the reception desk where a duffel bag was waiting for them.
This is what came in.
Jeff's mom looked down to see the black dress pants and white hoodie her son had worn the night of the incident. But now they were clean of blood and stitched together. She led Jeff to his room and made him put his clothes on. Then they left, never suspecting the change in Jeff, or what was to come. Later that night, Jeff's mother woke to a sound coming from the bathroom. It sounded as if someone was crying. She slowly walked over to see what it was. When she looked into the bathroom, she saw a horrendous sight. Jeff had taken a knife and carved a smile into his cheeks.
Jeff? What are you doing?
I couldn't keep smiling, Mommy. It hurt after a while. Now I can smile forever.
Jeff's mother noticed her son's eyes, ringed strangely in black. Then she gasped in horror as she realized what he had done.
Jeff, your eyes.
Jeff's eyes never blinked, never closed. His eyelids were gone.
I couldn't see my face. I got tired and my eyes started to close. So I burned out my eyelids so I could see myself forever.
Jeff's mother slowly started to back away. She had finally realized that her son had gone insane. Jeff, noticing the change in her expression, approached her.
What's wrong, Mommy? Aren't I beautiful?
Yes, son. Yes, you are. Let me go get Daddy so he can see your face.
She ran into her bedroom and shook Jeff's dad from his slumber.
Honey, get the gun.
She stopped. Jeff stood in the doorway, holding a knife.
Mommy, you lied.
Jeff rushed across the room with the knife, laughing all the while, and then stabbed and gutted both his parents. Meanwhile, his brother Lou woke up, startled by a sudden commotion. He sat alert for a moment, but when he didn't hear anything else after several minutes, he shrugged, shut his eyes, and tried to go back to sleep. As he was on the border of slumber, he got the strangest feeling that someone was watching him. Just as Lou looked up, a wet, sticky hand covered his mouth, stifling a scream. As Lou watched in horror, Jeff emerged from the darkness, gripping a knife in his blood-soaked hands. Lou thrashed wildly, trying to escape Jeff's grip. Jeff raised the knife.
Just go to sleep. Mr. Widemouth.
Narrated by Jesse Cornett.
Mr. Widemouth voiced by Jonathan Jones.
During my childhood, my family was like a drop of water in a vast river, never remaining in one location for long. And we had settled in Rhode Island when I was 8, and there we remained until I went to college in Colorado Springs. Most of my memories are rooted in Rhode Island, but there are fragments in the attic of my brain which belong to the various homes we had lived in when I was much younger. Most of these memories are unclear and pointless. Chasing after another boy in the backyard of a house in North Carolina, trying to build a raft to float on in the creek behind the apartment we lived in Pennsylvania, and so on. But there is one set of memories which remains clear as glass, as though they were just made yesterday. I often wonder whether these memories are simply bad dreams produced by the long sickness I experienced that spring. But in my heart, I know they are real. We were living in a house just outside the bustling metropolis of New Vineyard, Maine, population 643. It was a large structure, especially for a family of 3. And there were a number of rooms that I didn't see in the 5 months we resided there. In some ways, it was a waste of space, but it was the only house on the market at the time, at least within an hour's commute to my father's place of work. The day after my 5th birthday, attended by my parents alone, I came down with a fever. The doctor said I had mononucleosis, which meant no rough play and more fever for at least another 3 weeks. It was horrible timing to be bedridden. We were in the process of packing our things to move to Pennsylvania, and most of my things were already packed away in boxes, leaving my room barren. My mother brought me ginger ale and books several times a day, and these served the function of being my primary form of entertainment for the next few weeks. Boredom always loomed just around the corner, waiting to rear its ugly head and compound my misery. I don't exactly recall how I met Mr. Widemouth. I think it was about a week after I was diagnosed with mono. My first memory of the small creature was asking him if he had a name. He told me to call him Mr. Widemouth because his mouth was large. In fact, everything about him was large in comparison to his body. His head, his eyes, his crooked ears. But his mouth, by far, was the largest. "You look kind of like a Furby," I said, as he flipped through one of my books. Mr. Widemouth stopped and gave me a puzzled look.
Furby? What's a Furby?
He asked. I shrugged. You know, the toy. The little robot with the big ears. You can pet and feed him. Almost like a real pet.
Oh.
Mr. Widemouth resumed his activity.
You don't need one of those. They are not the same as having a real friend.
I remember Mr. Widemouth disappearing every time my mother stopped by to check in on me.
I lay under your bed,
he later explained.
I don't want your parents to see me, 'cause I'm afraid they won't let us play anymore.
We didn't do so much during the first few days. Mr. Widemouth just looked at my books, fascinated by the stories and the pictures they contained. The third or fourth morning after I met him, he greeted me with a large smile on his face.
I have a new game we can play,
he said.
We have to wait until after your mother comes to check on you, because she can't see us play it. It's a secret game.
After my mother delivered my books and soda at the usual time, Mr. Widemouth slipped out from under my bed and tugged my hand.
We have to go to the room at the end of this hallway.
He said. I objected at first. My parents had forbidden me to leave my bed without their permission, but Mr. Widemouth persisted until I gave in. The room in question had no furniture or wallpaper. Its only distinguishing feature was a window opposite the doorway. Mr. Widemouth darted across the room and gave the window a firm push, flinging it open. He then beckoned me to look out at the ground below. And we were on the second story of the house, but it was on a hill, and from this angle the drop was farther than 2 stories due to the incline.
I like to play pretend up here,
Mr. Widemouth exclaimed.
I pretend there's a big, soft trampoline below this window, and I jump. If you pretend hard enough, you bounce back up like a feather. I want you to try.
I was 5 years old with a fever, so only a hint of skepticism darted through my thoughts as I looked down and considered the possibility. It's a long drop, I said.
But it's all part of the fun. It wouldn't be fun if it was only a short drop. If it were that way, you may as well just bounce on a real trampoline.
I toyed with the idea, picturing myself falling through thin air only to bounce back to the window on something unseen by human eyes. But the realist in me prevailed. Maybe some other time, I said. I don't know if I have enough imagination. I could get hurt. Mr. Widemouth's face contorted into a snarl, but only for a moment. Anger gave way to disappointment.
If you say so,
he said. He spent the rest of the day under my bed, quiet as a mouse. On the following morning, Mr. Widemouth arrived holding a small box.
I want to teach you how to juggle,
he said.
Here are some things you can use to practice before I start giving you lessons.
I looked in the box. It was full of knives. My parents will kill me, I shouted, horrified that Mr. Widemouth had brought knives into my room, objects that my parents would never allow me to touch. I'll be spanked and grounded for a year. Mr. Widemouth frowned.
It's fun to juggle with these. I want you to try it.
I pushed the box away. I can't. I'll get in trouble. Knives aren't safe to just throw in the air. Mr. Widemouth's frown deepened into a scowl. He took the box of knives and slid under my bed, remaining there the rest of the day. And I began to wonder how often he was under me. I started having trouble sleeping after that. Mr. Widemouth often woke me up at night, saying he put a real trampoline under the window, A big one. One that I couldn't see in the dark. I always declined and tried to go back to sleep, but Mr. Widemouth persisted. Sometimes he stayed by my side until early in the morning, encouraging me to jump. He wasn't so fun to play with anymore. My mother came to me one morning and told me I had her permission to walk around outside. The thought of the fresh air would be good for me, she said, especially after being confined to my room for so long. Ecstatic, I put on my sneakers and trotted out to the back porch, yearning to feel the sun on my face. Mr. Widemouth was waiting on me.
I have something I want you to see,
he said. I must have given him a weird look because he then said,
It's safe. I promise.
I followed him to the beginning of a deer trail which ran through the woods behind the house.
This is an important path. I've had a lot of friends about your age. When they were ready, I took them down this path to a special place. You aren't ready yet, but one day I hope to take you there.
I returned to the house, wondering what kind of place lay beyond that trail. And 2 weeks after I met Mr. Widemouth, the last load of our things had been packed into a moving truck. And I would be in the cab of that truck, sitting next to my father for the long drive to Pennsylvania. I considered telling Mr. Widemouth that I would be leaving, but even at 5 years old, I was beginning to suspect that perhaps the creature's intentions were not to my benefit, despite what he said otherwise. For this reason, I had decided to keep my departure a secret. My father and I were in the truck at 4 a.m. He was hoping to make it to Pennsylvania by lunchtime tomorrow with the help of an endless supply of coffee and a six-pack of energy drinks. He seemed more like a man who was about to run a marathon rather than one who was about to spend 2 days sitting still. "Early enough for you?" he asked. I nodded and put my head against the window, hoping for some sleep before the sun came up. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. "This is the last move, son. I promise. I know it's been hard for you, as sick as you've been. And once Daddy's got promoted, then we can settle down and you can make friends." I opened my eyes as we backed out of the driveway. I saw Mr. Widemouth's silhouette in my bedroom window. He stood motionless until the truck was about to turn into the main road. He gave a pitiful little wave goodbye, steak knife in hand. I didn't wave back. Years later, I returned to New Vineyard. The piece of land our house stood on was empty, except for the foundation, as the house burned down a few years after my family had left. Out of curiosity, I followed the deer trail that Mr. Widemouth had shown me. Part of me expected him to jump out from behind a tree and scare the living bejesus out of me. But I felt that Mr. Widemouth was gone, somehow tied to the house that no longer existed. The trail ended at the New Vineyard Memorial Cemetery. I noticed that many of the tombstones belonged to children.
The Thing That Stalks the Fields by David Feuling. Narrated by Otis Jiry. It was a few weeks ago that the hay bales started creeping slowly away from the house. Every morning when I woke up, each had moved a few hundred feet from where it was before. I assumed it was pranksters with nothing better to do, so I ignored it. Within a few days, though, the bales began to approach the boundaries of the farm. I was tired of this whole game by then and decided to move them back. It took a tedious hour to bring them all from where they were to over near the house again, and by the time I was done, I was ready to snap the neck of whatever little pissant was deciding to screw with me. The next morning, I found each and every one of my horses messily decapitated. The smell was what woke me up. Each one was slumped over against the side of its stall. There were no signs of the heads. I spent the rest of the day cleaning up the mess and burying the remains. It was only when I was done that I noticed the bales of hay had all returned to their positions from the day before, scattered far out into the fields. This time, I left them where they were. That night, I sat on my porch with my shotgun in hand and a pot of coffee on the table beside me. I sat for hours, straining my eyes, watching the fields to catch a glimpse of who was moving my hay bales. Finally, I was beginning to nod off. I would have, but just as my eyes began to close, I heard a clamor and a rustling of trees from the nearby woods. I leaned forward, my heart racing with excitement. I was going to catch the bastard. I fumbled with my gun and fidgeted in my seat, waiting anxiously for whoever it was to get close enough to ambush. It was only when the thing got close enough for me to make out its silhouette in the dark that I was frozen still. The thing that crept into my fields from the nearby woods didn't seem to notice me sitting there. It stalked, hunched and deliberate through the field with the posture of a tiptoeing thief. If not for the fact that it must have towered over 10 feet tall, even in its crouched position, it might have seemed almost frail. The thinness of its arms and legs and the emaciated, caved-in quality of its chest reminded me of a starving animal. Still, this thing was undeniably strong, and I watched it hoist each bale up into its arms with ease and set it down carefully a while away, taking only a few strides to cover the distance. I watched it work, moving each bale thoughtfully. Every once in a while, it would straighten up to look around and at the other bales' positions in the field before adjusting the one it was working on ever so slightly. Before it left, it looked towards the house. I felt its eyes sweep over me in the dark, but whether it saw me or not, I couldn't tell. And then it turned silently and crept back the way it came, disappearing into the dark of the woods. It took me an hour before I had the courage to move at all. I went inside after a while, but didn't sleep that night. It was only when the sun arose that I dared step off my porch into the fields. The hay bales were where it left them. Strangely, it didn't move them as far as it had in the previous days. They were approaching something invisible in the fields, and as I looked at them, I realized that they seemed to be marking some line. Indeed, as I walked around the house, I saw the distinct circle that they formed with me at the center. At first, I thought the bales were just being haphazardly moved away from the house, but now I could see that they were instead being moved towards some boundary. The thing was sending me a message. I slept uneasily that night, and only because I was exhausted. They didn't move at all for the rest of the week, in fact. They were finally where the thing wanted them. I made myself sick trying to interpret them. Why would this thing expend so much energy moving my hay bales and threatening me with such violence should I try to interfere? Killing my horses was just that, a threat. an intelligent threat at that. It knew what would scare me, and it knew that I would understand the implications. The sound of an automobile working its way along the road to my farm one morning gave me a little rush of excitement. I'd been planning to abandon the farm since I saw the thing, but I couldn't hope to leave on foot without risking it treating me like it had treated my horses. But if I could get in the car with whoever was coming my way, I might be able to escape before it could stop me. I don't know or care who it was. I decided that that moment they stopped the car, I would jump in the passenger seat and tell them to get the hell out of there. I didn't get the chance. The car worked its way slowly along the road, trundling across the uneven ground. I urged it silently to hurry. It was when it passed between the two bales placed on either side of the road that I began to hear a booming clatter from the woods. The thing burst suddenly between the trees, sprinting on all four of its terrible, gangly limbs toward the car. Within a few seconds it was there, pouncing on the automobile like a predatory cat. Within moments, it was picking and peeling the vehicle's steel frame apart, working to get at the driver. The man, whoever he was, screamed all the while, and I could hear him even over the crunching of metal and the shattering of glass. It was only when the thing crushed him carelessly in its hand that the screaming stopped. It tossed him away and straightened up to look at me once again. In the sunlight, I could see the inhumanity of it. It was composed entirely of something awful and alive which was lashed together in a messy semblance of a human form. Whatever it was made of looked so polished and hard that if it weren't for the minute writhing of the stuff, I'd think it was made of granite. The thing retreated back into the woods, and I was left to my shock. My eyes wandered to where the car sat, the engine still sputtering between the two of the hay bales. Suddenly, I understood. The message was clear. I am this thing's captive, and I am not allowed visitors. Nothing may cross the borders it has set. I'm trapped here by the thing that stalks the fields, and it demands nothing except that I never leave. Still, I don't know if I can handle being that thing's canary. I've been thinking hard for the last few days since I saw it crush that man's chest, silencing him before he could finish his scream. If I crossed the hay bale border, it'd probably do the same. It'd smash my skull before I could put my hands up to protect myself. It'd go and find a new pet and probably keep looking until it found someone who could stand knowing that it was just waiting outside, watching it at all hours with its shiny insect eyes. I've been thinking hard for the last few days, and I might just make a run for it.
The Russian Sleep Experiment. Author, unknown. Narrated by Jesse Cornett. Stalinist Soviet researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days, using an experimental gas-based stimulant. These people, or rather test subjects, were political prisoners deemed to be enemies of the state during World War II. They were kept in a sealed environment and carefully monitored. Their oxygen intake was regulated so the gas didn't kill them, since it was highly toxic mixed with oxygen. The levels were watched closely. This was before closed-circuit cameras, so the monitoring was achieved through microphones and portal-sized windows in the walls of the chamber. These were made with 5-inch thick glass. The chamber was stocked with books, had running water along with a toilet. There were also cots to sleep on, but no bedding, along with enough dried food rations to last all 5 subjects for over a month. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, having been promised falsely that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for 30 days. Their conversations were listened to. Their activities were watched. The researchers noted that, with each passing day, the subjects spoke increasingly about traumatic incidents in their past. They discussed things usually hidden deep within the psyche, not easily revealed to strangers. After 5 days, the subjects started to complain about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were. They increasingly demonstrated severe paranoia. Soon, they stopped talking to each other and began alternately whispering to the microphones and peeking through the one-way mirrored portals in the chamber. Oddly, they all seemed to think they could win the trust of their researchers by turning over their comrades. They began betraying the other subjects in captivity with them. At first, the researchers suspected this was an effect of the gas itself, but more time was needed before they could draw any conclusions. After 9 days, the first of the subjects started screaming, as though he were in mortal danger. He ran the length of the chamber, repeatedly yelling at the top of his lungs. After this prolonged behavior went on for what seemed like hours, he continued attempting to scream, but was only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most startling thing about this behavior was the other subject's reaction to it, or rather, lack thereof. They continued whispering to the microphones until another started to scream. The two who remained silent calmly took the books in the chamber apart, smeared page after page with their own filth, and pasted them carefully over the glass portals. The screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering into the microphones. The chamber went silent. After 3 more days passed, the researchers decided to start checking the microphones hourly to make sure they were working, since they thought it impossible that no sound could be coming from the chamber, with 5 people inside it. When checking an oxygen monitoring device connected to the chamber, the researchers noted oxygen consumption rates which indicated the subjects were consuming oxygen at the rate of individuals engaged in strenuous exercise. This worried the researchers immensely. On the morning of the 14th day, in an attempt to get a reaction from the subjects, the researchers did something they had initially agreed not to. They used the intercom inside the chamber to speak directly to the subjects. There was real fear the test subjects may have died or gone into a vegetative state. That would have been frowned upon by the funder of this endeavor, who would arrive to see the results of the experiment. The lead researcher nervously announced,
"We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor, or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom."
To the researcher's surprise, a calm voice responded with a single phrase.
"We no longer want to be free."
Debate broke out amongst the researchers and the military forces funding the research over how to handle this development. For the time being, the subjects would remain exposed to the gas. After finding it impossible to provoke any more responses from the subjects using the intercom, it was decided that the chamber would be opened at midnight, the 15th day. When the clock struck midnight, the chamber was flushed of the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air. Immediately, voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for the lives of their loved ones, for the gas to be turned back on. Undeterred by these protests, the researchers ordered the chamber opened and soldiers were sent in to remove the subjects, who proceeded to scream louder than ever. The soldiers, normally extremely disciplined and emotionally neutral, began to scream as well when they saw what was inside the chamber. Only 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, and of those 4, what remained made several of the soldiers recoil and vomit. The food rations past day 5 had not been touched. The body of the dead subject had been torn to pieces. There were chunks of flesh from his thighs and chest stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, thoroughly blocking it. This had allowed 4 inches of soupy red fluid to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the detritus on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All 4 surviving subjects also had large portions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies as well. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips was initially believed to be caused by teeth. It was later determined to have been caused by using their fingers to pierce their own flesh. Closer examination of the position and angle of the wounds on the dead subject indicated they were mostly self-inflicted. The heart, lungs, and diaphragm of one of the subjects remained in place in his chest, but the skin and most of the soft tissue attached to the ribs had been ripped off. This exposed the lungs through the ribcage. All the blood vessels and internal organs from below the ribcage remained intact. However, they were no longer inside his body. His organs had been removed and laid on the floor. They had been fanned out in random piles around the eviscerated but still somehow living body of the subject. The digestive tract of the unfortunate was spread out across the length of the chamber. They could be seen to still be digesting food, pulsing and contracting on the floor. It quickly became apparent that what was being digested was the subject's own flesh. In spite of most of the soldiers being spetsopretsi, Russian special operatives, having served in multiple combat operations under the service of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces during World War II, many refused orders to re-enter the chamber. They were exposed to more gore and violence in a few years than most witness in a lifetime. Yet this, they could not face. A few of the soldiers, after being threatened, gave in to their superiors' demands and began to remove the subjects one by one. All the while, the subjects continued to scream to be left in the chamber. They alternately begged and then demanded that the gas be turned back on, lest they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the subjects put up a fierce fight in the process of being removed. One of the soldiers died from throat injuries, and another was gravely injured when the subject attacked his groin, severing an artery in the soldier's leg with his teeth. In total, 7 soldiers lost their lives. 2 were massacred that day, and 5 more followed, committing suicide in the weeks following the incident. In the struggle, the spleen of one of the subjects was ruptured, and he began to bleed out faster because of his trauma. The medical team attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. The subject was injected with more than 10 times the dose of a morphine derivative, considered to be lethal to humans, and he continued to fight like a cornered animal. His feral thrashings broke the ribs and arm of an attending doctor. Technically, he bled to death, yet the subject's heart still continued to beat for another 2 full minutes. When the subject's heart finally stopped beating, he began to scream and flail wildly, struggling to attack anyone within his reach. He repeated the word "more" over and over, becoming weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent minutes later. The surviving 3 subjects were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility. The 2 with the intact vocal cords continued begging for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. When they arrived, the most severely injured of the 3 were taken immediately to the only surgical operating room the facility had. In the process of preparing the subject to have his organs placed back inside his body, it was found that he was effectively immune to the sedative they had given him in preparation for the surgery. He fought furiously against his restraints when the anesthetic gas was applied to put him under. He managed to tear most of the way through a 4-inch wide leather strap on one wrist, even with a 100-kilogram soldier, adding his weight atop his chest. It took quite a bit more tranquilizer than normal to calm the subject. The instant his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped, and he seized wildly. The autopsy would later show that his blood had highly toxic levels of oxygen. His muscles were badly torn, and he had broken 9 bones in his struggle to not be put to sleep. Most of the breaks in his bones were from the force his own muscles had exerted on him. The second survivor had been the first of the 5 subjects to start screaming in the beginning of the experiment. His vocal cords destroyed, he was unable to verbally object to the surgery. He reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head yes when a surgeon suggested reluctantly that they try to operate without anesthetic. Over the entire course of a 6-hour procedure to repair damage due to self-mutilation, he didn't even blink. The head surgeon remarked repeatedly that it should be medically impossible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse who assisted the surgery stated that she had seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at his saviors and began to wheeze loudly, struggling to talk. Assuming the subject must have something of drastic importance to say, the surgeon had one of his assistants fetch him a pen and pad so the patient could write it down. The message was simple. Keep cutting. The last remaining subject was given the same surgery, also without anesthetic. The surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation due to the patient laughing continuously. The decision was made to inject him with a paralytic to prevent his muscles from moving. Once paralyzed, the subject could only follow the medical team with his eyes. However, the calm did not last as the epidural cleared the subject's system in an abnormally short period of time. He was soon trying to escape his bonds once again and motioning for the stimulant gas. The researchers and military officials who had arrived and were observing outside the surgical room tried communicating via intercom with the surviving subjects. The researchers asked why they had injured themselves, why they had eviscerated themselves. The military officials asked why they wanted to be given the gas again. Only one response was given. I must remain awake. Both subjects' restraints were reinforced, and they were placed into a holding chamber to await a determination as to what should be done with them. The researchers, facing the wrath of their military benefactors for having failed to achieve the stated goals of their project, considered euthanizing the surviving monstrosities. The commanding military officer instead saw potential and wanted to see what would happen if the subjects were put back on the gas. The researchers strongly objected, but were overruled. In preparation for being sealed in the chamber again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and their restraints were padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, both stopped struggling the moment it was let slip that they were going back on the gas. It was obvious at this point that they were extremely desperate to stay awake. The subject that could speak was humming loudly and continuously smiling, his reddish-yellow teeth glistening with small bits of flesh. The mute subject was straining his legs against the leather bonds with all his might. First left, then right, then left again for something to focus on. This subject was holding his head off his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been the first to be wired for EEG, The researchers were monitoring the rapidly blinking, mute subject's brainwaves with great interest. The waves were normal most of the time, but would flatline inexplicably, making it appear as if the subject was repeatedly suffering brain death just before returning to normal. As the researchers focused on the pinks and troughs of the paper scrolling out of the brainwave monitor, a single nurse saw the subject's eyes slip shut one final time. At this point, the subject's brainwaves immediately changed to that of deep sleep. This was followed by a surge, and then silence from the machine as his heartbeat ceased. As soon as his brainwaves subsided, his seizure began, and he was suddenly spraying blood from every open wound. The remaining subject that could speak started screaming to be sealed in immediately. His brainwaves showed the same flat lines as the recently dead subject. To the horror of the researchers, the attending military commander gave an order to his subordinate to seal the chamber, with both the live and dead subjects inside, as well as the 3 researchers. The lead researcher immediately drew a pistol and shot at the commander through the thick portal glass, but the bullet ricocheted and struck the mute subject, ending his suffering immediately. The armed researcher pointed his gun at the remaining subject, still restrained to the bed. The remaining members of the research team began beating on the sealed door.
I won't be locked in here with these things! Not with you!
Screamed the now trembling armed researcher at the remaining subject strapped to the table.
What are you?
He demanded.
I must know.
The subject smiled.
Have you forgotten so easily? We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven we cannot tread.
The researcher paused, aimed the pistol at his own temple, and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out.
So nearly free.
As the stimulant gas began to pour freely into the chamber once again.
Psychosis. By Matt Dymerski. Narrated by Jeff Clement. Sunday. I'm not sure why I'm writing this down on paper and not my computer. I guess I've just noticed some odd things. It's not that I don't trust the computer. I just need to organize my thoughts. I need to get down all the details somewhere subjective, somewhere I know that what I write can't be deleted or changed. Not that that's happened. It's just... Everything blurs together here, and the fog of memory lends a strange cast to things. I'm starting to feel cramped in this small apartment. Maybe that's the problem. I just had to go and choose the cheapest apartment, the only one in the basement. The lack of windows down here makes day and night seem to slip by seamlessly. I haven't been out in a few days because I've been working on this programming project so intensively. I suppose I just wanted to get it done. Hours of sitting and staring at a monitor can make anyone feel strange, I know, but I don't think that's it. I'm not sure when I first started to feel like something was odd. I can't even define what it is. Maybe I just haven't talked to anyone in a while. That's the first thing that crept up on me. Everyone I normally talk to online while I program has been idle, or they're simply not logged on at all. My instant messages go unanswered. The last email I got from anybody was a friend saying he talked to me when he got back from the store, but that was yesterday. I'd call with my cell phone, but reception's terrible down here. Yeah, that's it. I just need to call someone. I'm going to go outside. Well, that didn't work out so well. As the tingle of fear fades, I'm feeling a little ridiculous for being scared at all. I looked in the mirror before I went out, but I didn't shave the 2-day stubble I'd grown. I figured I was just going out for a quick cell phone call. I did change my shirt, though, because it was lunchtime, and I guess that I'd run into at least one person I knew. That didn't end up happening. Wish it did. When I went out, I opened the door to my small apartment slowly. A small feeling of apprehension had somehow already lodged itself in me. For some indefinable reason. I chalked it up to having not spoken to anyone but myself for a day or two. I peered down the dingy gray hallway, made dingier by the fact that it was a basement hallway. On one end, a large metal door led to the building's furnace room. It was locked, of course. 2 dreary soda machines stood by it. I bought a soda from one the first day I moved in, but it had a 2-year-old expiration date. I'm fairly sure nobody knows those machines are even down here. Or my cheap landlady just doesn't care to get them restocked. I closed my door softly and walked in the other direction, taking care not to make a sound. I have no idea why I chose to do that, but it was fun giving in to the strange impulse not to break the droning hum of the soda machines, at least for the moment. I got to the stairwell and took the stairs up to the building's front door. I looked through the heavy door's small square window and received quite the shock. It was definitely not lunchtime. City gloom hung over the dark street outside, and the traffic lights at the intersection in the distance blinked yellow. Dim clouds, purple and black from the glow of the city, hung overhead. Nothing moved, save the few sidewalk trees that shifted in the wind. I remember shivering, though I wasn't cold. Maybe it was the wind outside. I could vaguely hear it through the heavy metal door, and I knew it was that unique kind of late-night wind, the kind that was constant, cold, and quiet, save for the rhythmic music it made as it passed through countless unseen tree leaves. I decided not to go outside. Instead, I lifted my cell phone to the door's little window and checked the signal meter. The bars filled up the meter, and I smiled. Time to hear someone else's voice, I remember thinking, relieved. It was such a strange thing to be afraid of nothing. I shook my head, laughing at myself silently. I hit speed dial for my best friend Amy's number, and held the phone up to my ear. It rang once, but then it stopped. Nothing happened. I listened to silence for a good 20 seconds, then hung up. I frowned and looked at the signal meter again. Still full. I went to dial her number again, but then my phone rang in my hand, startling me. I put it up to my ear. "Hello?" I asked, immediately fighting down a small shock at hearing my first spoken voice in days, even if it was my own. I'd gotten used to the droning hum of the building's inner workings, my computer, and the soda machines in the hallway. There was no response to my greeting at first, but then, finally, a voice came.
"Hey,"
said a clear male voice, obviously of college age like me.
"Who's this?"
"John," I replied, confused.
"Oh, sorry. Wrong number,"
he replied, then hung up. I lowered the phone slowly and leaned against the thick brick wall of the stairwell. That was strange. I looked at my received calls list, but the number was unfamiliar. Before I could think on it further, the phone rang loudly, shocking me yet again. This time, I looked at the caller before I answered. It was another unfamiliar number. This time, I held the phone up to my ear, but said nothing. I heard nothing but the general background noise of a phone. Then, a familiar voice broke my tension.
"John?"
was the single word in Amy's voice. I breathed a sigh of relief. "Hey, it's you," I replied.
"Who else would it be?"
She responded.
"Oh, the number. I'm at a party on 7th Street, and my phone died just as you called me. This is someone else's phone, obviously."
"Oh, okay," I said.
"Where are you?"
she asked. My eyes glanced over to the drab, whitewashed cylinder block walls and the heavy metal door with its small window. "At my building," I sighed. "Just feeling cooped up. I didn't realize it was so late."
"You should come here,"
she said, laughing. "Nah, I don't feel like looking for some strange place by myself in the middle of the night," I said, looking out the window at the silent, windy street that secretly scared me just a tiny bit. "I think I'm just gonna keep working or go to bed."
"Nonsense,"
she replied.
"I can come get you. Your building is close to 7th Street, right?"
"How drunk are you?" I asked lightheartedly. "You know where I live,"
"Oh, of course.
she said abruptly.
I guess I can't get there by walking, huh?"
"You could if you wanted to waste half an hour," I told her.
"Right,"
she said.
"Okay, have to go. Good luck with your work."
I lowered the phone once more, looking at the numbers flash as the call ended. Then the droning silence suddenly reasserted itself in my ears. The two strange calls and the eerie street outside just drove home my aloneness in this empty stairwell. Perhaps from having seen too many scary movies, I had the inexplicable idea that something could look in the door's window and see me. Some sort of horrible entity that hovered at the edge of aloneness, just waiting to creep up on unsuspecting people that strayed too far from other human beings. I knew the fear was irrational, but nobody was around, so I jumped down the stairs, ran down the hallway into my room, and closed the door as swiftly as I could while still staying silent. Like I said, I feel a little ridiculous for being scared of nothing, and the fear has already faded. Writing this down helps a lot. It makes me realize that nothing is wrong. It filters out half-formed thoughts and fears and leaves only cold, hard facts. It's late. I got a call from a wrong number, and Amy's phone died, so she called me back from another number. Nothing strange is happening. Still, there was something a little off about that conversation. I know it could have just been the alcohol she'd had. Or was it even her that seemed off to me? Or was it... Yes, that was it. I didn't realize it until this moment, writing these things down. I knew writing things down would help. She said she was at a party, but I only heard silence in the background. Of course, that doesn't mean anything in particular, as she could have just gone outside to make the call. No, that couldn't be it either. I didn't hear the wind. I need to see if the wind is still blowing. Monday. I forgot to finish writing last night. I'm not sure what I expected to see when I ran up the stairwell and looked out the heavy metal door's window. I'm feeling ridiculous. Last night's fear seems hazy and unreasonable to me now. I can't wait to go out into the sunlight. I'm gonna check my email, shave, shower, and finally get out of here. Wait, I think I heard something. It was thunder. That whole sunlight and fresh air thing didn't happen. I went out into the stairwell and up the stairs, only to find disappointment. The heavy metal door's little window showed only flowing water as torrential rain slammed against it. Only a very dim, gloomy light filtered in through the rain. But at least I knew it was daytime, even if it was a gray, sickly, wet day. I tried looking out of the window and waiting for lightning to illuminate the gloom, but the rain was too heavy, and I couldn't make out anything more than vague, weird shapes moving at odd angles in the waves washing down the window. Disappointed, I turned around, but I didn't want to go back to my room. Instead, I wandered further up the stairs, past the first floor, and the second. The stairs ended at the third floor, the highest floor in the building. I looked through the glass that ran up the outer wall of the stairwell, but it was that warped, thick kind that scatters the light. Not that there was much to see through the rain to begin with. I opened the stairwell door and wandered down the hallway. The 10 or so thick wooden doors, painted blue a long time ago, were all closed. I listened as I walked, but it was the middle of the day, so I wasn't surprised that I heard nothing but the rain outside. As I stood there in the dim hallway, listening to the rain, I had the strange, fleeting impression that the doors were standing like silent granite monoliths, erected by some ancient, forgotten civilization for some unfathomable guardian purpose. Lightning flashed, and I could have sworn that, just for a moment, the old grainy blue wood looked just like rough stone. I laughed at myself for letting my imagination get the best of me. But then it occurred to me that the dim gloom and lightning must mean that there was a window somewhere in the hallway. A vague memory surfaced, and I suddenly recalled that the third floor
had an alcove and an inset window halfway down the floor's hallway. Excited to look out into the rain and possibly see another human being, I quickly walked over to the alcove, finding the large thin glass window. Rain washed down it as with the front door's window, but I could open this one. I reached a hand out to slide it open, but hesitated. I had the strangest feeling that if I opened that window, I would see something absolutely horrifying on the other side. Everything's been so odd lately. So I came up with a plan, and I came back here to get what I needed. I don't seriously think anything will come of it, but I'm bored, it's raining, and I'm going stir crazy. I came back to get my webcam. The cord isn't long enough to reach the 3rd floor by any means, so instead I'm going to hide it between the 2 soda machines in the dark end of the basement hallway, run the wire along the wall and under my door, and put black duct tape over the wire to blend it in with the black plastic strip that runs along the base of the hallway's walls. I know this is silly, but I don't have anything better to do. Well, nothing happened. I propped open the hallway to stairwell door, steeled myself, then flung the heavy front door wide open and ran like hell down the stairs to my room and slammed the door. I watched the webcam on my computer intently, seeing the hallway outside my door and most of the stairwell. I'm watching it right now, and I don't see anything interesting. I just wish the camera's position was different so that I could see out the front door. Oh, hey, somebody's online. I got out an older, less functional webcam that I had in my closet to video chat with my friend online. I couldn't really explain to him why I wanted to video chat, but it felt good to see another person's face. He couldn't talk very long, and we didn't talk about anything meaningful, but I felt much better. My strange fear had almost passed. I would feel completely better, but there was something odd about our conversation. I know that I've said that everything has seemed odd, but still, he was very vague in his responses. I can't recall one specific thing that he said. No particular name, or place, or event, but he did ask for my email address to keep in touch. Wait, I just got an email. I'm about to go out. I just got an email from Amy that asked me to meet her for dinner at the place we usually go. I do love pizza, and I've just been eating random food from my poorly stocked fridge for days, so I can't wait. Again, I feel ridiculous about the odd couple of days I've been having. I should destroy this journal when I get back. Oh, another email. Oh my god. I almost left the email and opened the door. I almost opened the door. But I read the email first. It was from a friend I hadn't heard from in a long time, and it was sent to a huge number of emails that must have been every person he had saved in his address list. It had no subject, and it said simply, "Seen with your own eyes. Don't trust them, they." What the hell is that supposed to mean? The words shock me, and I keep going over and over them. Is it a desperate email sent just as something happened? The words are obviously cut off without finishing. On any other day, I would have dismissed this as spam from a computer virus or something, but the words, seen with your own eyes. I can't help but read over this journal and think back on the last few days and realize that I have not seen another person with my own eyes or talked to another person face to face. The webcam conversation with my friend was so strange, so vague, so eerie, now that I think about it. Was it eerie? Or is the fear clouding my memory? My mind toys with the progression of events I've written here, pointing out that I've not been presented with one single fact that I did not specifically give out unsuspectingly. The random wrong number that got my name and the subsequent strange return call from Amy, the friend that asked for my email address. I messaged him first when I saw him online. And then I got my first email a few minutes after that conversation. Oh my God. That phone call with Amy. I said, over the phone, I said that I was within a half hour's walk of 7th Street. They know that I'm near here. What if they're trying to find me? Where is everyone else? Why haven't I seen or heard anyone else in days? No. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. I need to calm down. This madness needs to end. I don't know what to think. I ran about my apartment furiously, holding my cell phone up to every corner to see if it got a signal through the heavy walls. Finally, in the tiny bathroom near one ceiling corner, I got a single bar. Holding my phone there, I sent a text message to every number in my list. Not wanting to betray anything about my unfounded fears, I simply sent, "You seen anyone face to face lately?" At that point, I just wanted any reply back. I didn't care what the reply was or if I embarrassed myself. I tried to call someone a few times, but I couldn't get my head up high enough, and if I brought my cell phone down even an inch, it lost signal. Then I remembered the computer and rushed over to it, instant messaging everyone online. Most were idle or away from their computer. Nobody responded. My messages grew more frantic, and I started telling people where I was and to stop by in person for a host of barely passable reasons. I didn't care about anything by that point. I just needed to see another person. I also tore apart my apartment, looking for something that I might have missed, some way to contact another human being without opening the door. I know it's crazy, I know it's unfounded, but what if? What if? I just need to be sure. I taped the phone to the ceiling, just in case. Tuesday. The phone rang. Exhausted from last night's rampage, I must have fallen asleep. I woke up to the phone ringing and ran into the bathroom, stood on the toilet, and flipped open the phone taped to the ceiling. It was Amy, and I feel so much better. She was really worried about me, and apparently had been trying to contact me since the last time I talked to her. She's coming over now, and yes, she knows where I am without me telling her. I feel so embarrassed. I'm definitely throwing this journal away before anyone sees it. I don't even know why I'm writing in it now. Maybe it's just because it's the only communication I've had at all since God knows when. I look like hell, too. I looked in the mirror before I came back in here. My eyes are sunken, my stubble is thicker, and I just look generally unhealthy. My apartment is trashed, but I'm not gonna clean it up. I think someone else needs to see what I've been through. These past few days have not been normal. I am not one to imagine things. I know I have been the victim of extreme probability. I probably missed seeing another person a dozen times. I just happened to go out when it was late at night or the middle of the day when everyone was gone. Everything's perfectly fine. I know this now. Plus, I found something in the closet last night that has helped me tremendously. A television. I set it up just before I wrote this, and it's on in the background. Television has always been an escape for me, and it reminds me that there's a world beyond these dingy brick walls. I'm glad Amy's the only one that responded to me after last night's frantic pestering of everyone I could contact. She's been my best friend for years. She doesn't know it, but I count the day that I met her among one of the few moments of true happiness in my life. I remember that warm summer day fondly. It seems a different reality from this dark, rainy, lonely place. I feel like I spent days sitting in that playground, much too old to play, just talking with her and hanging around doing nothing at all. I still feel like I can go back to that moment sometimes. And it reminds me that this damn place is not all that there is. Finally, a knock on the door. I thought it was odd that I couldn't see her through the camera I hid between the two soda machines. I figured that it was bad positioning, like when I couldn't see out the front door. I should have known. I should have known. After the knock, I yelled through the door jokingly that I had a camera between the soda machines, because I was embarrassed myself that I had taken this paranoia so far. After I did that, I saw her image walk over to the camera and look down at it. She smiled and waved.
Hey!
She said to the camera, brightly, giving it a wry look. It's weird, I know, I said into the mic attached to my computer. I've had a weird few days.
Must have,
she replied.
Open the door, John.
I hesitated. How could I be sure? Hey, humor me a second here, I told her through the mic. Tell me one thing about us. Just prove to me that you're you. She gave the camera a weird look.
All right,
she said slowly, thinking.
We met randomly at a playground when we were both way too old to be there?
I sighed deeply as reality returned and fear faded. God, I've been so ridiculous. Of course it was Amy. That day wasn't anywhere in the world except in my memory. I'd never even mentioned it to anyone, not out of embarrassment, but out of a strange secret nostalgia and a longing for those days to return. If there was some unknown force at work trying to trick me, as I feared, there was no way that they could know that day. All right, I'll explain everything, I told her. Be right there. I ran to my small bathroom and fixed my hair as best I could. I looked like hell, but she would understand. Snickering at my own unbelievable behavior and the mess I'd made of the place, I walked to the door. I put my hand on the doorknob and gave the mess one last look. So ridiculous, I thought. My eyes traced over the half-eaten food lying on the ground, the overflowing trash bin, and the bed that I've tipped to the side looking for God knows what. I almost turned to the door and opened it, but my eyes fell on one last thing. The old webcam. The one I used for that eerily vacant chat with my friend. Its silent black sphere lay haphazardly tossed to the side, its lens pointed at the table where this journal lay. An overwhelming terror took me as I realized that if something could see through that camera, it would have seen what I just wrote about that day. I asked her for any one thing about us, and she chose the only thing in the world that I thought they, or it, did not know. But it did. It did know. It could have been watching me the whole time. I didn't open the door.
No.
I screamed. I screamed in uncontrollable terror. I stomped on the old webcam on the floor. The door shook, and the doorknob tried to turn, but I didn't hear Amy's voice through the door. Was the basement door, made to keep out drafts, too thick? Or was Amy not outside? What could have been trying to get in, if not her? What the hell is out there? I saw her on my computer through the camera outside. I heard her on the speakers through the camera outside. But was it real? How can I know? She's gone now. I screamed and shouted for help. I piled up everything in my apartment against the front door. Friday. At least, I think that it's Friday. I broke everything electronic. I smashed my computer to pieces. Every single thing on there could have been accessed by network access, or worse, altered. I'm a programmer. I know. Every little piece of information I gave out since this started, my name, my email, my location, none of it came back from outside until I gave it out. I've been going over and over what I wrote. I've been pacing back and forth, alternating between stark terror and overpowering disbelief. Sometimes I'm absolutely certain some phantom entity is dead set on the simple goal of getting me to go outside. Back to the beginning. With the phone call from Amy, she was effectively asking me to open the door and go outside. I kept running it through my head. One point of view says I've acted like a madman, and all of this is extreme convergence of probability. Never going outside at the right times by pure luck, never seeing another person by pure chance, getting a random nonsense email from some computer virus just at the right time. The other point of view says that extreme convergence of probability is the reason that whatever's out there hasn't gotten me already. I keep thinking, I never opened the window on the 3rd floor. I never opened the front door until that incredibly stupid stunt with the hidden camera, after which I ran straight to my room and slammed the door. I haven't opened my own solid door since I flung open the front door of the building. Whatever's out there, if anything's out there, never made an appearance in the building before I opened the front door. Maybe the reason it wasn't in the building already was that it was elsewhere, getting everyone else. And then it waited until I betrayed my existence by trying to call Amy. A call which didn't work until it called me. and ask me my name. Terror literally overwhelms me every time I try to fit the pieces of this nightmare together. That email, short, cut off, was it from someone trying to get word out? Some friendly voice desperately trying to warn me before it came? Seen with my own eyes, don't trust them. Exactly what I've been so suspicious of. It could have masterful control of all things electronic, practicing its insidious deception to trick me into coming outside. Why can't it get in? It knocked on the door. It must have some solid presence. The door. The image of those doors in the upper hallway as guardian monoliths flashes back in my mind every time I trace this path of thoughts. If there is some phantom entity trying to get me to go outside, maybe it can't get through doors. I keep thinking back over all the books I've read or movies I've seen, trying to generate some explanation for this. Doors have always been such intense foci for human imagination, always seen as wards or portals of special importance. Or perhaps the door is just too thick. I know that I couldn't bash my way through any of the doors in this building, let alone the heavy basement ones. Aside from that, the real question is, why does it even want me? If it just wanted to kill me, it could do it any number of ways, including just waiting until I starve to death. Wait, what if it doesn't want to kill me? What if it has some far more horrific fate in store for me? God, what can I do to escape this nightmare? A knock on the door. I told the people on the other side of the door that I need a minute to think and I'll come out. I'm really just writing this down so I can figure out what to do. At least this time I heard their voices. My paranoia. And yes, I recognize I'm being paranoid. Has me thinking of all sorts of ways that their voices could be faked electronically. There could be nothing but speakers outside, simulating human voices. Did it really take them 3 days to come to talk to me? Amy is supposedly out there along with 2 policemen and a psychiatrist. Maybe it took them 3 days to think of what to say to me. The psychiatrist's claim could be pretty convincing. If I decided to think this has all been a crazy misunderstanding, and not some entity trying to trick me into opening the door. The psychiatrist had an older voice, authoritarian yet still caring. I liked it. I'm desperate just to see someone with my own eyes. He said, I have something called cyber psychosis, and I'm just one of a nationwide epidemic of thousands of people having breakdowns triggered by a suggestive email that got through somehow. I swear, he said, got through somehow. I think that means spread throughout the country inexplicably, but I'm incredibly suspicious that the entity slipped up and revealed something. He said I'm part of a wave of emergent behavior, that a lot of other people are having the same problem with the same fears, even though we've never communicated. That neatly explains the strange email about eyes that I got. I didn't get the original triggering email. I got a descendant of it, My friend could have broken down too and tried to warn everyone he knew against his paranoid fears. That's how the problem spreads, the psychiatrist claims. I could have spread it too with my texts and instant messages online to everyone I know. One of those people might be melting down right now after being triggered by something I sent them, something they might interpret any way that they want. Something like a text saying, "Seen anyone face to face lately?" The psychiatrist told me that he didn't want to lose another one. That people like me are intelligent, and that's our downfall. We draw connections so well that we draw them even when they shouldn't be there. He said it's easy to get caught up in paranoia in our fast-paced world, a constantly changing place where more and more of our interaction is simulated. I have to give him one thing. It's a great explanation. It neatly explains everything. It perfectly explains everything, in fact. I have every reason to shake off this nightmarish fear that something or consciousness or being out there wants me to open the door so it can capture me for some horrible fate worse than death. It would be foolish, after hearing that explanation, to stay in here until I starve to death just to spite the entity that might have got everyone else. It would be foolish to think that, after hearing that explanation, I might be one of the last people left alive on an empty world, hiding in my secure basement room, spiting some unthinkable deceptive entity just by refusing to be captured. It's a perfect explanation for every single strange thing I've seen or heard, and I have every reason in the world to let all of my fears go and open the door. That's exactly why I'm not going to. How can I be sure? How can I know what's real and what's deception? All of these damn things with their wires and their signals that originate from some unseen origin. They're not real. I can't be sure. Signals through a camera, faked video, deceptive phone calls, emails, even the television lying broken on the floor. How can I possibly know it's real? It's just signals, waves, light. The door. It's bashing on the door. It's trying to get in. What insane mechanical contrivance could it be using to simulate the sound of men attacking the heavy woods so well? At least I'll finally see it with my own eyes. There's nothing left in here for it to deceive me with. I've ripped apart everything else. It can't deceive my eyes, can it? Seen with your own eyes, don't trust them. Wait. Was that desperate message telling me to trust my eyes? Or warning me about my eyes too? Oh my god. What's the difference between a camera and my eyes? They both turn light into electrical signals. They're the same. I can't be deceived. I have to be sure. Date unknown. I calmly asked for paper and a pen, day in and day out, until it finally gave them to me. Not Not that it matters. What am I gonna do? Poke my eyes out? The bandages feel like part of me now. The pain is gone. I figure this will be one of my last chances to write legibly, as without my sight to correct mistakes, my hands will slowly forget the motions involved. This is a sort of self-indulgence, this writing. It's a relic of another time, because I'm certain everyone left in the world is dead. Or something far worse. I sit against the padded wall, day in and day out. The entity brings me food and water. It masks itself as a kind of nurse, as an unsympathetic doctor. I think it knows that my hearing is sharpened considerably now that I live in darkness. It fakes conversations in the hallways on the off chance that I might overhear. One of the nurses talks about having a baby soon. One of the doctors lost his wife in a car accident. None of it matters. None of it is real. None of it gets to me. Not like she does. That's the worst part. The part I almost can't handle. The thing comes to me, masquerading as Amy. Its recreation is perfect. It sounds exactly like Amy. Feels exactly like her. It even produces a reasonable facsimile of tears that it makes me feel on its lifelike cheeks. When it first dragged me here, it told me all the things I wanted to hear. It told me that she loved me. That she had always loved me. Then it didn't understand why I did this. That we could still have a life together. If only I would stop insisting that I was being deceived. It wanted me to believe. No. It needed me to believe that she was real. I almost fell for it. I really did. I doubted myself for the longest time. In the end, though, it was all too perfect. Too flawless. Too real. The false Amy used to come every day. And then every week. And finally, stopped coming altogether. But I don't think the entity will give up. No. I think the waiting game is just another one of its gambits. I will resist it for the rest of my life, if I have to. I don't know what happened to the rest of the world, but I do know that this thing needs me to fall for its deceptions. If it needs that, then maybe, just maybe, I am a thorn in its agenda. Maybe he's still alive out there somewhere. Kept alive only by my will to resist the deceiver. I hold on to that hope, rocking back and forth in my cell to pass the time. I will never give in. I will never break. I am a hero.
The doctor read the paper the patient had scribbled on. It was barely readable, written in the shaky script of one who could not see. He wanted to smile at the man's steadfast resolve, a reminder of the human will to survive, but he knew that the patient was completely delusional. After all, a sane man would have fallen for the deception long ago. The doctor wanted to smile. He wanted to whisper words of encouragement to the delusional man. He wanted to scream. But the nerve filaments wrapped around his head and into his eyes made him do otherwise. His body walked into the cell like a puppet and told the patient once more that he was wrong. And there was nobody trying to deceive him.
Thanks for listening. The story you've just heard in this channel are fan-funded. Visit ChillingTalesForDarkNights.com today to become a patron and help us bring radio theater back from the dead. Just click Support Us, choose an amount you're comfortable with, and become a part of our family today. Just $2 per month gets you immediate access to our patrons area. There, you'll find advanced new releases, our incredible archive of over 300 hours of productions, plus never-before-heard bonus material. Best of all, it's totally ad-free and in HD MP3 format. You get insider updates from our production team, the secret stash of streaming downloadable HD indie films, and you get to experience our patrons-only one-on-one live events, putting you up close and personal with your favorite performers, unscripted and unrehearsed. All of this and more is yours today, and all you have to do is choose your level of support. Go to ChillingTalesForDarkNights.com now and join us as we turn off the lights and turn on the dark.